Now, as you probably noticed from the agenda, we're not going to have a round-table discussion in relation to ballot 1, which I'm about to explain to you. And we formed the view that it's relatively straightforward and it doesn't need a round-table discussion. So when I'm finished with the explanation, we'll go straight into the Q&A session. And the text of ballot 1 is on the screen behind me. It is. I'm not doing this business. Sharon is doing it. But first of all, the ballot paper provides a brief explanatory text which contextualises our work. It explains that the role as laid down for us by the Oireachtas is to consider the 8th Amendment. Now, the 8th Amendment was inserted into the Constitution, Article 40, Section 3, Subsection 3, which, like Sharon, I will call Article 40.3.3 from now on. And the 13th and the 14th Amendments added additional clauses to that article. And we've come to the conclusion that it is more accurate to discuss Article 40.3.3 rather than the 8th Amendment. And that is the terminology we have used throughout the ballot papers. So, as I say, when discussing your task, we will be talking about Article 40.3.3. Now, ballot 1 is our basic starting point. Does the Assembly want to retain Article 40.3.3 in full or not? Here the word retain is used to demonstrate that we are starting from the status quo, what the law is. The purpose of this ballot is to establish whether you, the members of the Citizens' Assembly, wish to change the status quo in some shape or form. And you have two options. In this ballot, there are only two options, unlike the other options. Option 1 is to retain Article 40.3.3 in full. If the members decide they wish to do that, if they wish that Article 40.3.3 is retained in full, there will be no further ballots or voting. It will be the end of the process effectively, except for the reflective, what I called the ancillary reflections I referred to earlier. So that will be the end of the process. Then option 2 is that Article 40.3.3 should not be retained in full. And if you, the members, vote for option 2 by a majority, you will have indicated that you wish to change the current constitutional position in some way. Therefore, if you decide that you do not wish that Article 40.3.3 is retained in full, we will proceed at that stage to the second draft ballot paper. And I want you to be clear that if the Oireachtas was to act on this option, a constitutional referendum would be required. Once the members have voted on this ballot, the results will be reported on. The agenda provides, as you will have seen, that this will take place around 12:05. Now, I want to say something about the presentation of results. The members have been provided with a note on the voting procedures to be used over the course of the weekend, and this has been put up on the website for the wider public. There are two specific aspects of this document which I would now like to draw to your attention. The first is in relation to how the results will be presented. A sample results sheet for this ballot is provided on the screen behind me. You see that reporting of results, ballot 1. You will see that the count and the result of the voting will provide some key information. First, it will specify the number of citizens eligible to vote. That's in the first line. Then it will specify the number of citizens who actually voted. In theory, this figure should be the same as the first, but there may be reasons why a discrepancy, might arise. For example, if a citizen decides not to cast his or her vote. So those two figures aren't necessarily going to be the same. Thirdly, you will see the results of the ballot presented in both absolute terms, in numbers, and in percentage terms. Both figures are provided for transparency and clarity. Where there is more than one option on the ballot, this will obviously be represented here too. Now, I want to say something, make some general observations about spoiled votes. The note you have also specifies how we will deal with spoiled votes. In formulating our rules in relation to voting, we've had regard to the principles applied in national elections. There, a vote which does not express a clear preference or which expresses multiple preferences where only one is sought is a spoiled vote. For the purposes of voting at the Citizens' Assembly, for the purpose of voting here today, these rules apply. And a spoiled vote arises in the following circumstances, and I'm going to mention two circumstances. The first is where the vote does not mark any option for where the voter does not mark any option for one or more questions. For the avoidance of doubt, a voter who has specifically marked the, quote, prefer not to state an opinion, end of quotation, box, will not fall into this category, because in such a case, the intention of the voter is clear. The voter has decided not to express an opinion. However, if a voter does not mark any option for one or more questions, it is not clear whether the voter did not wish to express a preference or whether they simply overlooked that particular question. Therefore, a ballot or part of a ballot which does not contain one mark should be counted as a spoiled vote for that particular question. That would not affect the validity of other questions on the same ballot paper. So you want to be careful when you're exercising your right to vote. Now, the second circumstance is this. A ballot will also be considered as spoiled if the voter marks more than one option in a single question. So that's the second circumstance. In this case that I've just outlined, again, it is not possible to determine the intention of the voter, so the vote should be treated as invalid. Now, that really completes my description of this ballot, which, as I said at the outset, we consider to be fairly simple, and the arrangements for voting. You will have learned something from the explanation in relation to the presentation of the results, which I hope has been helpful to you, and also to the issue of spoiled votes. So, as I said at the outset, we're not having a roundtable discussion on this, so we're going to move straight into the questions and answer session. And I'm going to be joined by the lawyers on the expert advisory group, Dr. Ronan Doyle from Trinity College, Professor Deirdre Madden from University College Cork, and Dr. Rachel Walsh from Trinity College Dublin. And they will assist in responding to your questions and comments concerning the wording of the draft ballot 1. And just to remind you what I said in the private session earlier, what they are going to address are specific issues in relation to the ballot paper. They're not going to address issues in relation to the wider context, for example, the content of presentations we had over the earlier weeks. So also bear in mind that there are mics available, and also bear in mind what I said earlier about speaking slowly and clearly so that the stenographer can capture everything that is said. Thank you very much.